Okay, I think I've got everything set up, and what I'm going to do is make a video where I completely assemble a Smart Parts Ion. A couple notes: the grip frame is partially assembled. I've got a Master Scony bottom line duckbill ASA. These are nice because you can flip them so that the macro line fitting comes out either side. I put it on the traditional left side of the frame. I've got an aftermarket 300 psi gauge I got on eBay. I think they're $10 each plus shipping, which is a good deal. It's hard to find the Smart Parts ones in good condition. Definitely not for that low price. And yeah, other than that, I've got, for this gun, I'm going to be using my reconditioned Epiphany board. You can tell it's an Epiphany board because it's got the red I don't know what this is, tape around the solenoid coil, and that indicates that it is a high power output solenoid, higher than the standard ion, which means it can shoot at 240 psi. The ion itself, or its stock ion, will top out probably around 200, 210 psi before it just won't be able to generate enough electromagnetic force to move the armature. Yeah, let's just get started. So we're going to first start off with the bolt, of course the core of the system, and the sail bolt is a 2 by 16 millimeter O-ring. I use the hydrogenated, I don't know how to pronounce it, HBNR, alright, bunanitrile. It's more resistant to wear. Polyurethane number 15 O-ring, 90 durometer. This is the bumper on the front. And then on the back, a number 10, 010 SAE measurement or whatever sizing. HBNR O-ring on the back. Shuts off the, well, it doesn't really shut off the airflow, but it keeps the air from shooting out of the back of the chamber. If you have a dual O-ring tail, the second O-ring that would go right here, which you'll find on the Tipman striker bolts that are actually ion bolts, but they do have that dual O-ring, and that will shut off the airflow when it's in the forward position. I actually have an ion that was able to get about 9 pods incredibly using one of these O-rings. I don't know what else magic I was doing with it, but it makes the ion actually really efficient if you get it set up right. The newer striker Tipman bolts are hollow here. They don't have this, what they call Venturi porting, that breaks up the airflow, hopefully making for a softer shot. So they're a little bit more poppier. Okay, so we got this one done. We'll do the bolt stop or donut next. So that gets the number 020 O-ring on the outside, HBNR, and a number 14. I have noticed when assembling ions, a couple dozen that I've assembled in the past year, that sometimes you'll get a leak down the bolt, and it can sometimes be from this O-ring, the number 014 that is on the bolt stop. And one solution I found, if you can't get it to sit right, and maybe it's because there's some sort of defect on the sizing of the plastic, or the plastic might be deformed a little bit over age, is to use a 55 Molykote 55, like Bob Long used to use in his Intimidators. And what that does is it softens or swells up the bunanitrile and makes it so that the seal will fill up any gaps or any small cuts or whatever, anything that's misshaped. It won't repair all damage, but it can definitely have had it stop the leak. I just put Molykote 55 all over that O-ring while it's installed. Actually, I put some in the groove and then put the O-ring in and put more on top of it, so it's just totally covered in it. Let it soak overnight. Install the bolt. That's fixed it at least once. The other option is that you have just like 100 number 14 O-rings and you just keep swapping them out until the leaking stops. Alright, we're done with that. Alright, here comes the tricky part of the forward breech. I don't feel like swearing, so I'll do that later. The rear can gets number 15, 015 O-rings on the back. You can't use anything harder than a 70 durometer. And pretty much all of these, except for the ones that I know that are, or the ones that are made of polyurethane and white, everything is going to be 70 durometer. The polyurethane ones that you'll see me install are 90 durometer. And that's just a measure of hardness of the material. And you use generally a 90 durometer O-ring in a place where it's going to be under a lot of pressure, like a high pressure application. I'm talking like 600 psi, or if it is something that is not going to, that you just need to stay in place and resist, which we'll see in the Ford breech. We'll see an example of that. Okay. Next, we're going to go ahead and get out our Molykote 33. This particular Molykote 33 that I ordered, it's got a fresh tube from DuPont Corporation. It says medium, but really the viscosity of it is like a light to me. This is pretty light. I've gotten some medium Molykote that was really thick, like a paste almost. And, you know, the paintball guns, when they're operating, they're using so much pressure. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You want, if you use a thicker lubricant, Dow 33 medium, or as opposed to light, because just the pressure it's under, you're not really gonna slow it down. I've seen people tell me that you really want to goop on this, but I just like to get like a light coating on there, especially for an O-ring like here at the back where it's not going to go anywhere. We're going to put this donut on now. This is the donut that goes in the back of the can. Just push it right on. And you're going to get your snap ring pliers. I got these at a Michael's. And you've got your snap ring, and you put it over the top like that. Just press it on. Boom, donut's on, okay? And you don't ever have to really do anything to maintain this unless it starts leaking. So this is basically sealed for the next 15 years. All right, next for the breech. This is the most difficult part, probably, putting O-rings on an Ion, because there are actually 4 O-rings on here. You can see this one I didn't quite get clean from disassembly, came to me used. Get a little bit of this paint off of here with my old stiff bristle toothbrush I got at HEB. All right, and what we're going to do is we'll start with the easiest ones first. So you got 20 right here. That actually will seal air, so we are going to put some grease on that later. Then you got a 22. Goes on the, basically just doesn't, there shouldn't be any air hitting this O-ring unless the one behind it has failed. This is more to keep the can and the breech snug fit together. All right, so the next one's tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the rear of the breech, and this is where, when the gun is at the rest position, the bolt actually sits like this and makes a tight seal between the breech where your paintball sits, which will be up here, and the so-called sail O-ring. And then you've got your bolt stop is going to be in there. And so you see what you've got is you're going to have a number 17, this guy, or the ones right there. Between the number 17 and the 20, you've got an air chamber. And actually, no, it's between the 17 and the 2x16 millimeter. This is actually shutting off the can here behind it, which holds all the air that's going to shoot the paintball gun. But right here, there's what we call like an air sear that's holding the bolt back. And so there's a chamber between the sail O-ring and this number 17. That's what holds in the rear position. What's going to happen is, if you see here, when we shoot the gun, the Ion, the air that's holding this bolt back exits through this tube right here and down through the bottom of the solenoid, because this armature that was closing off that bottom so the air can't escape and it holds the bolt forward, it moves up when you energize. We'll demonstrate this later. It moves up, and that opens up a little hole, a vent or exhaust port in the bottom of the solenoid. The air quickly exits out, and that causes the force pushing the sail O-ring here to push the bolt forward where it's going to go forward. And then when it hits right here, you see these grooves in the bolt. As soon as the internal O-ring, the number 14, breaks that seal, air is going to start to rush from the can, all right, through these little ports right here into these holes, and then the air from the back of the can shoots the paintball forward. All right, so what we got to do here now is we got to put the number 17 inside a little O-ring groove that's right here at the back of the breech. So I'm going to put the O-ring in there. I've got my other finger in here where I can feel the groove, right? So I know where the O-ring goes, and I'm going to push the O-ring and sort of hold it in place with my other finger. Once I get it in the groove, I'm going to hold it in place. So it's now I can see, I look in there and I can see I've got it in the groove. And then I take my other finger, my pinky, and I'm just going to push the O-ring so it just pops right into the groove right there. Boom, it's in. All right. So that's done. And now this comes the tricky part. It's a little bit, maybe not as tricky because again, I can see a lot better where it goes because it's going to be a number 17 O-ring. And remember we talked about durometers earlier. This is a 90 durometer. It's much stiffer than a 1770 durometer. Oops, see that? Just flew right out of my hands. So this one is stiffer, and it needs to be stiffer because this was the so-called seal forward technology. If you ever wondered why a shocker is called an SFT, seal forward technology. So what happens is that the bolt is, remember we talked about the bolt moving forward in the breech. It's moving forward in the breech like that, and then when it gets to the very end of the stroke, it's gonna, when it has the paintball in the barrel, and that makes sure that the air doesn't blow back into the breech when the paintball that is shooting and the air from the can is exhausting down the bolt. Most other, and the reason why they did this gimmick, because that's really what it is, most other companies put the O-ring on the bolt and don't really have a problem. You'll see that on Eclipse bolts, for example, all the time. It's all over the place. Yeah, I mean, you don't really, there's no real advantage to having this. In fact, it's worse because now I have to use a 90 durometer O-ring, which increases the cost of my kit, right, or manufacturing. And I have to get it in the damn internal O-ring groove, and it's the same thing in reverse. Notice I've got the feed neck off my breech because I don't want the feed neck to get in the way. All right, so I did that. I'm doing the same thing where I use my pinkies to sort of, I see that it's in the groove that's in there, and I'm just going to make sure that it doesn't pop out of the groove with one finger and get another one. It's a little bit easier because it's stiffer, so once you get it in place, it's not going to move. So there, I've done it. I've got in the rear breech O-ring and the front each breech O-ring. If your bolt is leaking down the barrel, and you're sure it's leaking down the barrel because you'll be able to put your finger over the bolt and you'll hear the hissing get softer because you're covering it up. There's only two real places that you will find a leak. It will be the number 14 we talked about earlier, and it's the number 17 here at the back. So if you have a leak, just change those two O-rings out with new O-rings, and that should solve the problem. And if that doesn't, you've got other problem inside the gun. There might be damage. There might be damage on the bolts. Might be scratched. That could cause a leak. But generally, if you've got a good new bolt like this one, I mean, this one's pristine. It's not even been used. I don't think it's even been shot. The O-rings are going to be the source of the problem. All right, so now we're going to put our Moly Coat 33 medium. I just fill up the groove, nice and just enough to get it filled. I don't glop it on there because allegedly that can cause the bolt to not move as well, I suppose. I've never had that problem, but that's what I've heard. And if you go to the Bible of Ion maintenance, or just Bible of Ions period, which is zdspb.com. That's zdspb.com. You can go there right now. You can, if you are bored with this video, you can pause the video or close and just go to that website and learn everything I know from looking at that. But yeah, he recommends that you also put a little grease on the face of the bolt. Doesn't hurt to get it just a little bit shiny. And right here, because these are this point and this point and this point and this point are all making contact with O-rings. Okay, so you'll make sure those are nice and good with some Molykote 33, put some more 33 on here. On these internal O-rings, I like to take like a pick or something and just sort of spread it around and make sure that they're, that the groove where the O-ring sits is just full of, has a good level of grease on it. There's already grease on the bolt, so we're just making sure that there's enough grease everywhere. Okay, and we can go ahead, and it doesn't hurt. You don't necessarily have to get the O-rings that aren't moving or touching anything that's moving, but I like to put Molykote on everything just to keep the O-rings from drying out, because that's what you'll see when you get a lot of these old paintball guns is they've been sitting with no grease on them, and the O-rings, all their moisture goes out over the course of 15 years, and you've just got garbage. Just falls apart. All right. We're ready to install our bolt. Okay, so I skipped over important part. When you've got your bolt stop, when there's a little cut in there, it will sit right in there. But you want to make sure that this concave side, that with the deeper cut into it, is towards the back, because the air is flowing, and so they're sort of directing the airflow directionally, so there's less turbulence if it was just a flat cut, down the center of the bolt. So I'm going to put that in there with the concave side towards the back of the gun, and I'm going to take my bolt and just pop it in there. Boom. Okay, I don't really have to do much else with that for now. All right, so I go back over the breech, and I'm going to get a little bit of Molykote 33 on my pinky, and I'm just going to put, make sure that rear O-ring, the 1770 diameter in the back, has got some lubricant on it, and I'm going to just put a little bit on the front, but it doesn't really matter because, first of all, you don't want to have a bunch of grease in your breech because it'll shoot into your barrel, and then secondly, if I put grease on there, it's going to get blown off anyway because the bolt's just constantly hitting it 10 bolts a second. And now we're ready to assemble our bolt assembly. So final grease is going to go on this number 20 O-ring because this completes the seal. This makes the seal between the front and the back half of the gun, or the bolt assembly. All right, we should have a good to go working bolt assembly. All right, and this is going to be the core of the gun. Note that a sad truth about the Smart Parts iron is that to maintain the bolt, you have to totally disassemble the gun. Not as much as this, but you have to take the whole gun apart, which you'll see in another video in which I do basic maintenance of an ion. You have to take everything apart to get to the bolt. Fortunately, they designed these things to be pretty much tanks, and it will, because of the way it's designed, it will shoot even if it starts getting clogged with dirt and paint, as long as the air passages are clear and there's no other problems like a weak battery. I mean, it will pretty much shoot through a lot of mess, and because it's all enclosed, it's hard to get dirt, it's hard to get stuff into the bolt assembly compared to like an Intimidator or an Ego, one of those type guns, which makes this a better gun for X-Ball, frankly. All right, so putting aside that guy, next thing we're going to do is assemble the regulator, because it's the other essential part of this gun that requires a lot of O-rings. And so we've got here the piston. Now I'll say about first of all, I'll say about these regulators that they're wildly underestimated. I think they're fine. They're basically the same design that was in the NXT. These seals that they put on, I don't know what material they used, some sort of polyurethane, but this has got to be about 20 years old, and it looks like it's going to last another 100. I've never seen, the only problem I've seen with a few of these is they've dried out and they'll fall about or sort of crumble, but most of the ones I see are in like perfect condition. The other thing, it's a very hard material, and so if you really crank down on it, because of the way they've designed their system, it's almost impossible to damage the seal by over pressurizing or well, not pressurizing, but just cranking down on the adjustment, not to the point where there's no air flowing. With other ones where you've got sort of a sharp piston hitting it, like on most older Ego or Planet Eclipse guns, it's very easy to like crank down to turn off, lower the pressure on your regulator and destroy the seat to the point where it doesn't even regulate air anymore, barely does. Common damage you see in paintball guns. But anyway, all right, so this guy is also made of brass, like a very high quality. I mean, this one's perfect. All right, number 16 or 016 HBNR O-ring, 70 durometer, number 0110 or 010, 010, 010, however you want to say it, SAE HBNR O-ring on the bottom there. Okay, here comes my secret. What I like to do with these ion regulators is I got these plastic shims from McMaster-Carr. If you need to know what size they are, I mean, you just can go on McMasterCarr.com and just get your calipers and measure out what kind of nylon disc you want. But this is what they did in the NXT regulators, which is why this works. The NXT regulators, those guns shot at around 220, and is much higher than the ion, actually, which is interesting because the ion allegedly is harsher on paint, and the NXT was shooting a higher pressure, so it's hitting the paintball with more force. But something about the bolt design made it pretty gentle on paint. But anyway, the nylon washer was used, and what you do is you put that on there, and you just take your spring and you put that on there, and now you're going to get a boost of about like 40 to 50 psi. Well, actually, not even that much. Yeah, it's about right, 40 to 50, because with this on, you can turn your gun up to a high pressure where it won't shoot. Whereas without the nylon disc, without any surf spacer, you may struggle to get up to 180, at which point, because of today's paint, this is a 689, I think, barrel that they shipped with it, and today's paint is so small that if you want to shoot at 280, 290 and use it in a tournament, like I did this past weekend, you want your pressure set at 180, and that will put you right in the range no matter how small your paint is. Your paint's going to shoot right 270, 290. Maybe not consistently, but it'll be in that legal usable range. Okay, so we've got that O-ring installed. We've got, next we're going to put the Molykote 33 on there. And this is important. I actually don't know if this matters, but I've never bothered to experiment. What I like to do is there are these little holes on the regulator piston, and I just like to clear those out just in case like air is supposed to be going through there. You know, you don't want to clog anything with lubricant. If you have, anytime you're putting lubricant like grease on a paintball gun, you don't want to have anything that's an obvious air passage blocked, because that could interfere with the way that the gun is supposed to operate. A lot of this stuff is pretty high precision. I mean, they're integrating in some cases like quick exhaust valves, QEVs. They're in QAVs and so forth. And what you don't want to have happen is it not operate the way it's supposed to operate, and thereby destroying, the delicate internals of your gun, or just having the gun not shoot. Actually, more likely, or shoot a low velocity shot when you need to shoot that guy off the break on the other side of the field. So now we've got the bottom regulator, and this is actually the same adjustment nut that would be used. I don't know what the adjustment cap, I think they called it in the part catalog. This is the same as what you would find in an NXT. So if you have an NXT shocker where this is cracked, which I've seen happen a lot, because I guess people drop their gun and it cracks, look shitty, pardon my language. The very low quality aluminum they use to make these guns, it can start leaking. So what you do is you buy yourself a $20 ion regulator on eBay, and you just pull this adjustment cap from it, and then your NXT stock regulator will work again. It's got swivel fitting, which is essential to have on these guns because of the way the pressure is adjusted. And I'm putting a number 10 90 durometer O-ring in there to make sure it won't leak. And then if it gets hit with any sort of sand or debris, that doesn't just slice the O-ring and I start getting that horrible O-ring hiss that is maddening when it happens. That will fix that right up. I'll just show really quick, if you ever have an issue where your macro line is leaking, all you gotta do is get a pair of pliers. I have these miniature ones. You can just pull this thing right off. And then you just pry out with your O-ring pick, the number 10 O-ring, the old one that's in there, and you put in a brand new polyurethane 90 durometer number 10 O-ring, and you just push that right back on there. And that'll do that. Okay, so next we have to put the number 18 90 durometer O-ring, and in this case, one of the other things about the higher durometer is that because they're stiffer, they provide higher resistance. So in this case, they want you to use the 90 durometer O-ring so that when you put your regulator at a certain pressure position, without having any sort of adjustment screw that prevent it from turning, you can be assured that this won't move as easily. Okay, now the final thing is I've got to put the spring platform. It's a little brass piece. It's got a little hex nut on the front of it. Another little custom-made piece that you would never see in any other probably object. I don't know, I guess maybe they might exist out there in the world, but I've only ever seen them used in these Smart Parts guns, or at least the Ion. And so what you do is this is a special piece that you have to buy. It's a 9/16 deep well socket. And you need to get the deep well socket because you are going to be screwing this thing way down, and it is reverse threaded, so that when you are adjusting your gun, it's less likely that you're going to accidentally loosen the spring platform and have it lose pressure, because the wing will be nice and tight. But you don't want it to lose pressure in the middle of a game, because then you won't be able to shoot the bad guys in front of you. All right. We get out our screwdriver here, or Allen key driver, and we're going to put in the locking screw. And I don't know what size this is. You'll have to look it up later on your own. Just if you have a little Allen key set, just make sure you just try them all until you get one that works. All right, so that's how I learned to do it. I put a little grease on here, just, it defeats the purpose of keeping it from turning, but it makes it easier to turn when it does turn, and it keeps the O-ring from drying out and failing. And this does hold pressure back, because there's going to be air coming in through here, going up through the middle. I don't know exactly how it works. I'm going to try to explain it like I did the bolt. These things are a little bit mysterious to me, but whatever. Also reverse threaded. So just go. This is the most tedious part. All right, so it starts to hit the O-ring and then becomes stiffer and harder to turn. And now what we're going to do is we're going to find this little hole right here, and we're going to put this nut, or this Allen bolt. It's a little socket cap Allen bolt. If you go on zdspb.com, there's a link where you can get all the screw sizes for all the Smart Parts guns. Very handy. All right. That's it. We've assembled our regulator. One last piece. We're going to put a 1590 durometer O-ring on the top here. And yeah, wipe it down because I got my palm sweat all over it. All right, hey, we're almost ready to build a paintball gun here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to assemble the heart. It's the other heart of the gun, which is going to be the board. And I'm going to use for this demo anyway, this Epiphany board. And the programming is exactly the same as a stock Ion board. It just puts out more voltage, so it can move the bolt or move the armature under higher pressure. All right, so I've attached my 9-volt. It turns on. It's working. Make sure that I can move the armature so that you can see it's jumping there. And I've got this preset at 36 dwell, 36 blinks of dwell. Max out the recharge. So if I put the recharge, which is this slow yellow blinking light, it's already at the top. And then of course rebound, you just put in rebound mode, and you know what you've got there? You've got 10.5 legal ramping Ion. I used it at U6BL this past weekend. Referee came up to me and said he wanted to look at my gun. said, let me see that gun. I handed it to him because that's what you do when the referee asks to inspect your gun. I held my breath for a second because I thought he was going to tell me my ramping mode was illegal, and then he said, I haven't seen one of those in a while. That's great. I just want to admire my ion. And I was happy to have people appreciate an important piece of history in our sport. All right, so what I've done here is I've attached an eye board and eye wire. Before I go ahead and assemble the whole gun, I like to make sure the electronics are working as expected. So I turn on my gun again. You gotta hold the button, hold the button. If you see a slow blink, that's good. That means that the eyes are working and they're not detecting any obstruction. And this particular board is I think a Lucky board that has a white LED. So when I block the light, the LEDs, you get a fast blink. That means it sees a paintball, and then it will shoot. And then when you stop it, it won't shoot, right? This is good. This is all what we want to do. And then if we turn the eyes off, fast blink, or double blink rather, you get double blink. All right, good. And turn it off, holding the button, good. All right. One thing to note about these ion boards is I repair them and recondition them myself. I use a, what is this called? Nichicon 22 microfarad 16 volt capacitor that is audio quality. That's what they say. I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming that means that for my ion, at least, it's going to make my ion sing, I suppose. All right, so these are all guaranteed to work. Buttons are new if they need to be. Give it a good scrub down with rubbing alcohol or isopropyl 99.9%. Make sure everything works. I've had some problems with these boards not retaining memory, which is weird, but that seems to go away after a while. Maybe the capacitor does something. I don't know. I'm not an electrician or electronics person. Okay. I just know how to fix dumb stuff on ion boards. All right, so now we're going to put on the head, the solenoid head or cap. And with this, I've already pre-installed for convenience a number 009 90 durometer polyurethane O-ring. And it says in the manual, or like the parts, that it can be a HBNR or a bunanitrile. I think they use polyurethane actually, 70 durometer polyurethane. But I use the 90 just because I want this thing to stay in place. This tubing is brand new from McMaster-Carr. I can provide you maybe I'll put in the description the links to go buy this tubing, but I found this tubing that works great and is stiff, and you just have to take your old solenoid head and cap and carefully with a razor blade, like a sharp hobby knife, without scratching the barbs here, remove it. You trim it off first here, and then you use a razor blade cutting away to remove it, and that way you maintain keep this thing from being damaged. I've trashed a lot of them, not knowing what I was doing, but now I got to figure it out. All right, we got to put O-rings on these guys. Now, I don't have them in front of me, but I do have from Clippard replacement barbs that will work on ions and actually have fewer problems. But I'm using these older banjo bolts to sort of maintain the original look of the ion. You have that look when you open it up and you see what the condition is in the inside, which is totally invisible until you pull it apart. You always see those banjo bolts there. I think it's sort of a unique thing. I've never seen any other gun really. Not the same way anyway as the Ion series. But so what I'm doing here is I'm putting fresh O-rings on the banjo bolts externally. They're 1.5 millimeter times 3 millimeter O-rings. These are bunanitrile. It's the only material I could get that size in. And you want to make sure that there's no obstructions in here. Looks like there is some for some reason, because the air this is how the air moves through the gun, is through these connection points. All right, I got that done. And also, yeah, this is why I'm replacing all the O-rings. Really, if you're going to build an ion, just go ahead and replace every O-ring. at this point, after 20 years, if you get an O-ring that, excuse me, an ion that comes to you, and the plan is to get it working, you might as well just change out every O-ring that you can, because after 20 years, even polyurethane trial, this thing, it's deteriorated. It's just the material has lost its integrity. So your ion will work great if you just take care of it. All right, we've got attached the banjo fittings to the tubing. One thing about that you'll see if you go to zdspb.com is that when you install the head here on the solenoid, you want to make sure that, so if you're looking at it this way, that it's both these barbs are sort of slanted down, not the other way. Otherwise, the tubing will be facing or going the wrong direction to fit in the gun. You also want to remember that you put this clip in. I'll show you one more thing, which is that just this armature. This is the Keon DOS armature. This is the Keon DOS armature. And you get this from Keon DOS on Facebook, Keion, and then DOSS, which is a DOS armature. And it's totally redesigned. I don't have one of the old armatures handy, but instead of a big fat like bump or knob on the bottom of it, that was good. It's just got, a very sensible little piece of bunanitrile, probably 90 durometer. On the bottom, sort of press fit in like a lot of other, I wouldn't say armatures, but lots of other applications where you see this kind of situation. The solenoid's pretty unique, I think. It's not like the sort of Parker style or the other solenoids out there. I can't remember the ones who makes the Japanese ones they make for the Dai series guns, but yeah, it's got the little seal on the top to block off so what happens is it jumps, the air is flowing out, the air is flowing through the front, from the regulator, it goes down here and it goes out through this little barb fitting on the front of the solenoid, and normally there's a little hole down here and the armature is blocking off the bottom, right? And so what happens is that when the solenoid energizes, so this is blocking off the bottom, that rubber seat right there, and there's a smaller one on the top, and when it energizes, it shoots up, and there's a little hole right here you can see, and it's going to block off just for a few milliseconds, like 26 milliseconds, I think is what my guns are set at. 26 milliseconds, it's going to block off that air, and when it does that, that vent opens up, and when that vent opens up, the air comes out that's holding the bolt forward, rushes out very quickly through this tubing, and the bolt shoots forward, and all the while the air is still flowing. So as long as your bolt is forward, air is shooting down your barrel, which is for 26 milliseconds, which is why ions are not that gas efficient. Most of the early, what are they called? What do they call them? There's the poppet valve and the spool valve guns. The spool valve guns early ones were not efficient for that reason, because you just waste a lot of air holding the bolt forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure the wider part here is on the bottom. We're going to put the head of the solenoid on so that it's slanted towards that direction, the left side of the gun. I'm going to take my clip. I always forget to put these on, and then my gun blows up. Not really, but leaks air like crazy. Put that clip on. That makes sure that when it's under pressure that it doesn't burst apart, which it will do if you don't have that clip on. Your gun won't work. All right, we're getting into the good stuff here. Before we go any further, we're going to put the feed neck on. So this is a Q-lock feed neck. And I'm just going to put some blue Loctite thread locker on here. Just some dabs around it. Sort of just spread it around so that my feed neck doesn't come off when I'm in the middle of a gunfight. And I'm going to just gently find the threads. Don't make sure I don't cross thread, and I screw it on. I've got it to the end. I'm just going to give it a little hand tight. Just make it hand tight. Because if I really get something like a strap wrench or something, I'm going to damage the threads, or I'm going to break my feed neck, which I've done before because I'm an idiot. Okay, next thing we're going to do is a little secret trick for today's Q-lock feed necks, which is I take some of this infamous tape. You don't have to use infamous tape. I just happened to buy it at an XL as a souvenir. And, you know, it's fun to buy souvenirs, right? Like, maybe you buy a Cyborg from 2007 Cyborg, I think. And which seemed like a good gun at the time, but turned out long term they were not good. And then you spend lots of time and money trying to get it working, and you determine that it is a lost cause. But what I do is, with the souvenir tape that I got, which is far more handy than a broken Cyborg, is I put this tape around the outside, and because this is a trick that I learned when I owned a Lux 2.0 that I used one of the first years I was competing. I put that tape on there because that way it's going to be a tighter clamp on your loader. And some of these Q-lock feed necks have a problem where you just can't get them tight enough. But just by putting tape around, it presses in the, whatever you call it, the crown in here enough that it's going to get a good lock. All right, a little plastic piece. Try to get away from me. Let's see, I think that fits in here on this side. That means I put my little clamp there, and this is where I start to know the sizes of bolts, but I can always get that one backwards. So I just get my 1/8 wrench, my favorite wrench. It's my most used wrench in paintball, for sure. And I'm gonna just tighten her down. All right, we're getting there. Bands by Burt, or Burt Prints, makes, for me, these beautiful 3D printed detents, which is good news because they stopped making these detents this year. So I'm going to feel in there and make sure, yep, a little nub right there. But they stopped making ion compatible detents this year. They're out of stock everywhere. They're never coming back. I asked Ryan Moorhead if he'd find some for me. He said he'd go look. I wasn't sure if they'd be holding up after 20 years. But then Burt Prints, who is a good friend, and everyone should go buy his stuff or follow him, Burt Prints and Bands by Burt, figured out how to print ion detents, so we're in business. That was the last missing piece of having like an ion repair service or whatever, if I should do such a thing, which it seems like I'm doing. All right. So, whoa, I went flying out there. That's a tough one. All right. We got the eyes in there. We put your favorite body sleeve. This is all I got left. So we're going in black, which nothing wrong with that. The ion I used this past weekend to compete in US6BL, black stock ion. Looked great. All right, get our favorite wrench, the 1/8, and we're going to put the banjo bolts on, and be very careful not to cross thread. This is where you will cross thread your screws or your bolt into the body, and then you're going to have to buy a new donut or a whole new assembly for the rear of the bolt system. All right, before you screw down the center banjo bolt, you're going to take your eye wire, which is attached to your board, and you're going to put it under. You want to put it under this part of the banjo bolt. This is a small detail, but it's an important one because we're going to make sure by threading the wires under this banjo bolt, so you can sort of see how I'm doing that. All right. I'm going to get underneath the banjo bolt. I'm going to try not to, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift it up here a little bit, just a little bit, to get the wires underneath. I'm going to get them back down here. All right. And then I'm going to carefully sort of bend the head of the wire, the other eye wire, at a 90-degree angle, so that without stretching the wire around, I can get it in there. There we go. Everything's fine. I haven't broken anything. And I take my plastic spudge. Don't use like a Allen key or a pick, because you will damage the wires. Use a plastic spudge. It's less likely to damage anything. You can get the like electronics store. That's what they're actually called. Very handy to have around with these delicate electronics. All right, and everything sits nice and pretty. We're ready to put her in there. All right, very exciting. Here's our frame, stock trigger. Yeah, I showed that earlier. So I'm going to very carefully thread the battery connector in there, and I'm going to very gently like line up the board where I can feel it moving freely. Now, if you get to this point and the board doesn't move very easily in and out of the frame, then you should stop, all right? Because you need to take a look at it, because there's something wrong with the frame, or it's not manufactured correctly to get the board in there, right? Or there's some damage or something, or there's dirt, or there's paint, or something's in there that's stuck in there. The other problem that can happen that you have to watch out for, and I had this happen just this past weekend, is you want to make sure that the button for the power button for the Ion, that it's not sticking really far into the cavity here of the trigger frame, which can end up hitting the power switch right there and breaking it off. I've seen that. I mean, most of the boards I see have that damage. So in this case, everything looks good. It slides in. I've got my front tubing. I put that in place, the management bolt in place, and I'm going to make sure not to cross thread right here, which can happen. And I'm just going to go finger tight. That's all I need. All right? Good. We're getting there. We got this countersunk screw. I use, all the old ones are all rusted out, so I have these new zinc alloy. Now I'm not going to tighten that down all the way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get the other screws going here. Just going to make sure that they go in nice and that they're connecting, so the body's connected, but I'm not tightening it down yet. Center one, you don't need this bolt actually, but I just put it in there for completeness. But your gun will work just fine without it. It's just insurance that when these guns are made to go without service for a long time. So they just wanted to make sure that everything stayed together. Less likely to have the gun stop working because parts can listen. Now that I've got everything threaded, I can be sure that I'm not going to cross thread, and I'm just going to go, again, sort of finger tight. I'm not really cranking down. I don't get out my T-grip, right, and just start like cranking on these guys, because I'll either strip out the body or I'll strip out the head there, and I'm just be a huge pain in the ass. All right. We are almost ready to shoot this gun. All right. Very exciting. All right. So I've got my regulator. I'm going to put that in there. All right. Okay. And now I'm going to go ahead and put the grip on this side. And I just realized I didn't do something, so I'm going to fix it in a second. All right, so the right side screws on the grip panel, you actually do want to get those like without stripping it out, like stripping the screw out, like get it as tight as you can, because you're going to be you shouldn't be taking that off. Other thing we're going to look at that we've installed is that where is the trigger in relation to the switch. So this grip, fortunately, is pliable enough that it didn't fall apart. It hasn't dried out, but it is good to have it like a T-handle. Makes it a little bit easier because you don't want to get in the way of the grip. And what I want to do is, so you're adjusting how close the trigger is to the switch, basically. And there's a nut that you turn, and when you turn it counterclockwise, you turn it so it's lower, it makes the pull a lot longer, and as you go the other way, it makes the pull shorter. And I like to put the trigger just above, it's hard for me to see, but just above touching the micro switch. So the leaf so it's just barely touching it, so that I get a nice short pull. And then you don't really need this trigger stop. You can go ahead and, in most cases, like you don't need the trigger stop screw in there. I back it out so it's still working. I could probably just take it out, because it's not going to, the problem that you're looking for is to prevent the trigger from hitting the board and damaging the board. That's your main concern. But if you want to leave it in there, you can make for a really short pull, like it'd be like a millimeter pull. That's like where you're barely moving the trigger to shoot it. The problem with that is you're going to get bounce where it's shooting more than once in semi-automatic. And I just don't think it's a very good trigger feel. It's just my personal preference. All right, so let's just make sure it works and we haven't damaged anything by putting it together before we go any further. So we're going to install the battery and hold the button, God, boom, it's on. All right, so we see a slow blink, which means the eyes are working. Fast blink means that the eyes are blocked. It's got the making of a sweet little shooter here. So one more note is that in programming mode, in a programming mode, you hit that button and then use the power button to increase value or to lower value if it's a red color. Red color is going to move a value of a setting down. This is very old school electronics here, guys. But that moves your dwell up, and you should never put this higher. I mean, you really don't need to put this higher than 36. Actually, I would say never put it lower than 36 dwell. You probably can go as low as like 28, but every ion I've worked on will shoot fine at 36. Shoots at about 270, 290 feet per second at 36 dwell. The pressure at 180. It's dialed in. Like all these guns are the same. There's really not much difference. It's a very rough, unrefined firing mechanism, so there's really not a lot you can do to fine tune it. The QEV just makes the bolt go faster. I don't use QEVs because it does nothing to help your gun. You want your bolt to move slowly and you want to shoot 10 balls per second, and you're really not making it do anything much better. Like there's not really an efficiency gain. I just took off the regulator because I'm going to put on this filter in the body filter. Not really necessary, but I put them in there because they were in the original design. And they're also pretty unique to this gun. All right. Well, we're at the end. Now I just have to get a piece of macro line, and I feel like because this is a brand new build that it deserves a fresh piece of macro line. So, grab that. I've got my macro line. Nice new bundle I think I just got recently. I don't know why I go through so much macro line, but there you have it. In 2025. So let's see here. We want it to go from about here to here. You'd think after all these years I'd have the distance, the length of macro line memorized, but yeah, it should go right about there. This is gripping stuff, right? All right. There you go. Here's the moment of truth. What's going to happen? Am I full of shit or what? Shout out to the guy who sent me this remote line along with whatever ion I bought from him. Let's go ahead and take that off. Oh, battery's still on. All right, here we go. We did it. No leaks. It is airtight, baby. I have to be honest, I didn't know if when I aired this up what was going to happen, but in my heart I knew it was going to work. I heard a leak. Nope, it went away. Whatever was wrong went away. It's perfect. All right, come see me this weekend at X Factor Paintball Park on Sunday. I will have, maybe I'll have both guns as a demo. You can try shooting an ion if you want. And this past weekend I was selling ions, so watch this space because maybe there will be an announcement about, I don't know, some stupid ion hobby business, because it seems like it'd be a lot of fun to fix ions for people. So I do it by myself anyway, like tonight. And now I'm going to go be a husband and father. Y'all have a good rest of whatever you're doing.